We think of the modern economy as weightless, data moving across borders in milliseconds. But the physical things we buy, the electronics, the clothes, the raw materials, are incredibly heavy, and almost all of it still moves on water. For the massive manufacturing hubs in East Asia to operate, they have to physically connect to energy sources over in the Middle East. But sitting directly between the Indian and Pacific Oceans is a massive, sprawling wall of islands, the Indonesian archipelago. There is one primary way through, the Strait of Malacca. It's a narrow corridor of water wedged right between the Malay Peninsula and the Indonesian island of Sumatra. This diagram illustrates the sheer volume of global traffic compressing into this tiny space. Every year, an estimated 90,000 ships are forced through this gap. That accounts for roughly 1/4 of all the world's traded goods and about 1/3 of all global seaborne oil. For superpower economies like China, Japan, and South Korea, this passage is an absolute necessity. A massive portion of the oil they consume to keep their countries running travels right through these waters. It is a daily energy lifeline. A single collision in this corridor triggers a cascading delay that moves from the water to the global economy within 24 hours. Despite its immense economic importance, the strait is remarkably tight. At its narrowest stretches, the waterway shrinks to just a few kilometers across. You have the heaviest, most advanced container ships and oil tankers passing dangerously close to one another. This diagram shows the underwater profile of a fully loaded supertanker. Because these modern vessels carry so much weight, their hulls, known as drafts, reach deep below the surface. In certain areas, the strait is relatively shallow, leaving a dangerously thin margin between the bottom of the ship and the seafloor. Add to that the environment itself. The water here is pulled by strong, shifting currents and regularly hit by unpredictable tropical storms, making an already tight squeeze far more complex to navigate. To prevent these massive steel vessels from colliding, the corridor requires highly coordinated human intervention. Ships rely on specialized pilots, rigid traffic monitoring systems, and highly structured lanes just to maintain order on the water. Combine shallow water, severe weather, and thousands of massive ships squeezed into a few kilometers, and any margin for error vanishes. A standard maritime transit becomes a high-stakes gauntlet. This specific geography also created a unique human problem. Large merchant ships, heavily loaded with valuable cargo, are forced to move slowly right alongside thousands of small islands and coastal inlets. For centuries, it was the perfect environment for piracy. Criminals adapted to modern shipping. Armed groups use fast, low-profile boats and hit-and-run tactics. They board a massive vessel under the cover of darkness, steal cargo or valuable equipment, and then vanish back into the maze of nearby islands before help can arrive. By the early 2000s, this waterway was recognized globally as one of the most dangerous piracy hotspots on Earth. Dozens of commercial ships were being attacked every single year. The economic threat became so severe that the surrounding nations, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, and Thailand, were forced to launch coordinated multi-nation military patrols just to protect commercial shipping traffic. Those joint patrols drastically reduced the number of attacks, but the geographic vulnerability is permanent. As long as valuable ships are forced through this tight island corridor, the threat of piracy remains an underlying tax on global trade, which naturally raises a question. If navigating this narrow, shallow, and heavily patrolled corridor is so difficult, why don't shipping companies simply sail around it? There are alternative passages. A ship could sail further south, bypassing Malacca entirely, and cut through the wider, deeper gaps in the Indonesian archipelago, like the Lombok or Sunda Straits. This map illustrates the problem with that plan. Taking one of these southern detours adds hundreds, sometimes thousands of kilometers to a standard voyage, turning a routine transit into a multi-day delay. Those extra days on the water are expensive. A longer route requires a massive increase in fuel consumption. It increases crew wages, insurance premiums, and daily operating costs for the shipping companies. Avoiding the strait creates a permanent economic penalty. Adding 7 days of transit time forces factories to halt production lines while waiting for parts, while the billions in extra fuel costs are inevitably passed down to the consumer at the point of sale. When a single cargo vessel successfully clears that waterway and docks at a massive terminal, it keeps local factories running, it keeps raw materials flowing into production lines, and it ensures electronics eventually end up on our shelves. We like to believe our digital networks and satellite communications have freed us from the constraints of physical geography, but global trade is still firmly bound by the layout of the continents. The stability of entire industries across Europe, Asia, and the Americas quietly depends on thousands of steel hulls safely navigating a single crowded stretch of water every single day. And the modern world is actually filled with these surprising physical bottlenecks, vast oceans connected by tiny, fragile passages that quietly power our way of life. Sometimes the most important places on Earth are rarely the largest. They are simply the narrowest.